I paid my brother's bills for 3 years while he built his business. The day he made his first million, he cut me off and told everyone I was trying to control him. 3 years of my savings, my salary, my sacrifice, and the moment he didn't need me anymore, I became the villain in his story. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 38 years old. For 3 years, I kept my brother's life from falling apart. Rent, groceries, car payments, utility bills, school supplies for his kids, medical copays, everything. $90,000 total, most of my savings, a significant portion of my monthly income for 36 straight months. I believed in him. I believed in his dream. And the week his startup crossed its first $1 million in revenue, he blocked my number, erased me from his social media, and told a podcast audience that I was a toxic presence he'd had to cut out of his life to grow as a person. I found out from my mother. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice strange and careful. "Daniel, have you heard Ryan's new podcast interview?" I hadn't. She read me the relevant part over the phone. My brother, my younger brother, the one I had carried for 3 years, told a host with 200,000 subscribers that the secret to his success was eliminating the people in his life who didn't truly believe in him. He said he'd had a family member who dangled financial help like a leash. He called it a form of control. He said cutting that person out was the most important decision he'd ever made for his mental health. He never said my name. He didn't have to. Everyone who knew us knew exactly who he was talking about. I sat on my couch for a long time after my mother hung up. $90,000. 3 years. And I was a leash. This is the full story. Everything. From the beginning. Ryan and I grew up in a small town outside of San Antonio, Texas. Our parents were working class. Dad drove a delivery truck. Mom worked as a school secretary. They were good people. Hard workers. They didn't have much, but they gave us everything they could. The neighborhood we grew up in was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and almost nobody left. People stayed because they had roots, or because leaving felt like too large a risk, or because the town was genuinely comfortable if you adjusted your ambitions to fit its size. I was always planning to leave. I made that clear from an early age. I wanted to study, to build a career, to see what existed beyond the county line. Ryan never talked much about leaving. He just talked about what he was going to build. Even at 12, 13 years old, he had the habit of laying out entire systems on paper, not drawings exactly, more like blueprints for ideas. A car wash with a subscription model and a loyalty program. An app that matched neighborhood kids with odd jobs for local businesses. A platform that let farmers sell directly to restaurants. The ideas varied. The precision of the thinking didn't. Dad would sit across from him at the kitchen table, listening with this expression I can only describe as proud bewilderment. He understood hard work. He understood showing up. He didn't entirely speak the language Ryan spoke, but he recognized that his youngest son had something. He'd look over at me sometimes, mid-Ryan monologue, and give me a small nod, like we both knew we were watching something. I was 5 years older than Ryan, which, growing up, felt like a lifetime. By the time he was navigating middle school, I was in high school. By the time he hit high school, I was gone, community college first, then a transfer to a state university, studying accounting and finance. Ryan was always the creative one, the one with the big ideas. He could sit at the kitchen table and sketch out entire systems, how a business would work, how people would interact with it, what problem it solved, why it was better than anything that existed. He was sharp, genuinely sharp. Dad used to say Ryan had a mind like a steel trap. He also had a streak of impatience that got him into trouble. That impatience showed up in his relationship with formal education. He enrolled at a state school the same year I graduated. I remember dropping him off at his dorm, helping him carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, giving him the older brother speech about going to class and not partying his scholarship away. He laughed, because he always laughed, and told me he had it handled. He did for a while. Freshman year went reasonably well. Sophomore year, less so. By the middle of his second year, he had declared and undeclared 2 majors, accumulated a scattering of credits that didn't cohere into anything recognizable, and was spending most of his intellectual energy on a side project involving an online marketplace for vintage tools. The marketplace never launched, but the thinking behind it, The market research, the user flow, the monetization logic was genuinely sound. He dropped out in the spring of his second year, called me from a parking lot outside his dorm, said it was a waste of time, said he learned more in a week of actual problem solving than in a semester of lectures about problem solving. I didn't argue with him. I'd watched him in action enough times to know he wasn't entirely wrong. But I worried about the practical consequences. A degree opens doors, even for people who don't need what's behind them. Without one, you sometimes have to fight to be taken seriously in rooms where you're the smartest person present. He got a job at a tech company doing entry-level support work. Met a girl named Cassie at a work event. Fell hard and fast. They were married by the time he was 24. 2 kids by 27, a son named Eli and a daughter named Piper. Ryan loved his family. That was never in question. He was a devoted dad. Present. Engaged. The kind of father who coached Little League and built science fair projects and remembered every stuffed animal's name. But loving your family and being able to financially sustain your family are 2 different things. Ryan bounced between jobs, always chasing the next opportunity, always convinced the current place was too small for what he was capable of. He wasn't wrong about his capabilities, but the gaps between jobs were rough. Cassie worked part-time as a dental hygienist, which helped, but they were always right on the edge. There were months when I knew, without being told directly, that things were tight for them. Ryan would get quieter in our phone calls, less expansive. He'd ask me about Austin in ways that felt like he was imagining a parallel life. I'd send him gift cards at Christmas in amounts large enough to actually matter, framed as holiday generosity, because I knew accepting direct financial help would bruise his pride. He would thank me without making it weird, which told me he understood exactly what I was doing. I, meanwhile, had built a stable life. Took a job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Austin after college. Worked hard, got promoted, made decent money, not wealthy, but comfortable. Lived within my means. Saved aggressively. Had about $110,000 in savings by the time I turned 35. I was single, no kids, low overhead. I drove a used car I'd bought outright. Lived in a 2-bedroom apartment I could afford without stress. I didn't live lavishly, but I lived well. And I had options. Ryan, at 30, had almost nothing in savings. He had a dream, though. He came to me in the spring. He'd been working on a concept for a software platform for about 8 months, nights and weekends, obsessively. It was a project management tool designed specifically for small construction companies. He'd done the research. He'd talked to dozens of contractors and site managers. He'd built a rough prototype. He sat across from me at my kitchen table and walked me through the whole thing. 45 minutes. Detailed, specific, passionate. He knew the market. He knew the gap. He knew what the product needed to do. He had a folder, an actual physical folder, with printed charts showing the fragmentation in the construction software market, estimating the addressable user base, projecting adoption curves. He'd read everything he could find about the space. He'd had 3 conversations with contractors who told him, unprompted, that they would pay for exactly the product he was describing. It wasn't a pitch in the performative sense. It wasn't polished in the way an investor pitch gets polished, with slick slides and practiced pauses. It was just Ryan, sitting in my kitchen, talking about something he understood deeply and cared about completely. And that combination of genuine knowledge and genuine passion, was more convincing than any deck he could have built. I believed him. I told him that. I believe in this, Ryan. I really do. He looked relieved in a way that told me he'd been carrying the weight of uncertainty for a long time. His shoulders dropped about 2 inches. He exhaled slowly, like a man who had been holding his breath for the length of the presentation. Here's the problem, he said. I need to quit my job to build this properly. I've got 6 months of living expenses saved up, maybe 7 if we're careful. After that, I don't know what happens. Cassie can't carry the whole household. We've got the kids. We've got the mortgage. He paused. He picked up his coffee cup and then set it back down without drinking from it. I need help, Dan. I need a runway. Just until I can get the product to a point where investors will take it seriously. Or until I get first revenue. Whichever comes first. I'm thinking 2 years, maybe 2.5 at the outside. How much are we talking per month? He'd done the math already. Of course he had. Their mortgage was $1,800. Car payments. They had 2. totaled $640 a month. Utilities averaged about $280. Groceries and household supplies for a family of four, roughly $800. Kids' school expenses, extracurriculars, copays, variable, but he estimated $400 a month on average. Total, approximately $4,000 a month, not counting Cassie's part-time income, which ran about $1,200 to $1,400 a month depending on her hours. So you'd need me to cover the gap? I said. Roughly $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Maybe a little more some months. I hate asking, Dan. You know I hate asking. I know. And I did know. Ryan's pride was real. The fact that he had sat down, prepared those charts, made that case, and was now sitting across from me asking, that wasn't easy for him. I could see it in the way he was holding himself. He was braced, slightly, like he expected me to say something that would sting even if it was said gently. I'll pay you back every cent. With interest if you want. I'll put it in writing. A proper loan agreement. Whatever you need. I didn't ask for a written agreement. I should have. I know that now. But he was my brother. It felt cold and legalistic to demand documents from my own brother. I had watched him make promises his entire life and mean them in the moment he made them. I had no reason, then, to believe this promise would be different. You don't need to do all that, I said. We'll figure out the repayment when the time comes. Right now, just focus on building the thing. He hugged me, held on longer than usual. I won't forget this, he said. I mean it. I will never forget what you're doing for me. I believed him. I started transferring money the following month. At first, it was $2,600 a month. Then Eli needed braces. I covered the down payment and first 3 months. Then their car needed a transmission repair, $20 to $100. Then Piper had an ear infection followed by a persistent fever that required 2 specialist visits. I covered the out-of-pocket costs. The amounts crept up. Some months it was $3,000. Some months it was closer to $4,000. Ryan kept me updated on the product, sent me demos, walked me through new features on video calls. His enthusiasm was genuine and infectious. I could see the platform taking shape. It was good, really good. By the end of year 1, he had a working beta. He started doing demos for small construction companies in the area. Got his first 2 pilot users. Companies willing to test the platform in exchange for free access and the chance to shape its development. I told him this was great progress. I meant it. It's coming together, he said. I'm close, Dan. I can feel it. I kept transferring money. By the end of year 2, I had sent him a total of roughly $60,000. My savings account, which had sat at around $110,000 before this started, was now just above $50,000. I was also contributing monthly, which meant I was no longer saving much on my own, just maintaining. I didn't resent it. I want to be clear about that. I didn't walk around feeling put upon or martyred. Ryan was working hard. The product was progressing. He sent me updates regularly. He called often. He expressed gratitude consistently. I don't know where we'd be without you, he said, during a call in the fall of the second year. Cassie and I were talking about you last night, about how different our lives would look right now. We're going to take care of you, Dan. When this works, and it's going to work, we're going to take care of you. I believed him. Year 3 was harder on me personally. A woman I'd been dating for 14 months ended things in January. She said I was emotionally unavailable, that I was so focused on saving my brother that I had nothing left over for the people in my own life. She wasn't entirely wrong, and I knew it. I just didn't know what to do about it. The relationship had been good, genuinely good, and I had cared about her in a real way. But she needed a version of me I wasn't fully able to provide. A version that wasn't always doing mental math about Ryan's next bill cycle. A version that could plan a weekend away without first calculating what cash I had left after the monthly transfer. She was kind about it, which almost made it worse. She didn't leave angry. She left tired. I also missed out on a down payment opportunity on a condo I'd been watching. The market moved before I could pull together enough cash, because my cash reserves were too depleted from supporting Ryan. I watched the unit go to another buyer and felt a hollow ache that I didn't share with anyone. I skipped my annual vacation for the 3rd year in a row. I declined 3 work trips to cities I would have liked to see. I drove my car past the point where it should have been replaced, nursing it through 2 separate repairs because the timing was never right to take on a car payment. None of this felt heroic in the moment. It just felt like what you do for your family. Ryan was aware, broadly, that I was stretching myself. I didn't hide it, but I also didn't make it his problem. I didn't call him to report my sacrifices. I didn't send him itemized lists of what I was going without. I just kept showing up. What I did do, occasionally, was mention the running total in passing, not as a demand, not as leverage, just the way you might mention any large shared project that you're both navigating. Getting close to 80,000 all in, I said once, on a call in the fall of year 2. I'm not worried about it. Just wanted us both to have the same number in our heads. Ryan said he knew, said he thought about it constantly, said it kept him motivated on the hard days. Looking back, I think those mentions, those simple factual references to what was happening between us, are what Ryan eventually reframed as constant reminders, as if naming reality was the same thing as weaponizing it. By month 32, Ryan had secured 2 enterprise-level clients, mid-sized regional construction firms. The platform was generating real revenue, meaningful revenue. He told me he was in early conversations with a venture capital firm that had expressed interest. This might actually be happening, he said, on a call in February of that 3rd year. His voice had a quality I'd never heard in it before, like a man on the edge of a finish line, looking back at how far he'd run. I know it's happening, I said. I never doubted it. Dan, he went quiet for a moment. I want you to know something. When this investment closes, if it closes, the first check I write is to you. The full amount, plus extra. You gave me this. You and Cassie and the kids, we're going to do right by you. I'm not worried about the money. I know, but I am, and I will. I believed him. The investment closed in April. Ryan didn't call me. I heard about it through my mother, who'd seen a LinkedIn post. A growth equity firm had made a significant investment in Ryan's company. The announcement referenced a 7-figure commitment. Ryan was quoted in the press release. This investment validates everything we've worked for. We're building the future of project management for the construction industry, and we're just getting started. I read the press release 3 times, not because it was complicated, but because I was looking for something I didn't find. A mention of the people behind the scenes. An acknowledgement of the years before the investors arrived. Something. There was nothing. But I told myself that was normal. Press releases are about the company, not the founder's support system. I shouldn't have expected to see myself in it. I texted him congratulations that afternoon. He replied, 3 hours later, with a thumbs-up emoji. That was odd. A single emoji, after 3 years. After $90,000. After 36 months of transfers and phone calls and late-night conversations about user acquisition and enterprise contracts and investor decks. A thumbs-up emoji. But I told myself he was busy. He'd just closed a major deal. There were probably 100 people pulling at him. I called him 4 days later. It went to voicemail. I left a message. Casual, warm, just wanted to catch up, hear how he was feeling. He didn't call back. I texted him again a week later. Asked if he wanted to get together and celebrate. Nothing elaborate, just dinner. My treat. No reply. I reached out through Cassie. She replied to my text with a brief, oddly formal message. Ryan's been really busy with everything. I'll let him know you reached out. Cassie and I had always been warm with each other. She'd called me herself, more than once over the 3 years, to express her own gratitude. Once, this was probably 18 months into the arrangement, she'd left me a voice message while Ryan was at a user meeting. Her voice was emotional in a quiet way. She said she didn't know how to properly thank me. Said she knew what I was giving up. Said she hoped I knew it mattered. Said she and the kids were lucky to have me. So the formal, brief text felt wrong. Not just cooler than expected. Wrong. Like it had been composed carefully. Like she'd thought about it before sending. 2 weeks of silence turned into 4. I called my mother and asked if she'd heard from Ryan. She had. She'd had him over for Sunday dinner. He seemed happy, she said. Excited. Different somehow. Did he mention me? I asked. A pause that felt a fraction too long. Not specifically, she said. I noticed I'd been unfollowed on Instagram. I checked Facebook, removed from his friends list there, too. I thought it might be an app glitch. I messaged him through a mutual friends account, just to check in. Nothing. Then my mother called me on a Tuesday evening, voice careful and strange. She'd been listening to a podcast she'd found through a recommendation in a Facebook group for small business owners. The host had interviewed Ryan about his entrepreneurial journey. She read me the passage. I sat on my couch for a long time after she hung up. I looked up the episode myself. I listened to the whole thing, 47 minutes, headphones in, alone in my apartment. Ryan spoke eloquently. He spoke about resilience and persistence. He spoke about his wife's support and his children's inspiration. He spoke about the product, the market, the investors, the vision. And about 40 minutes in, the host asked him, "What was the hardest personal decision you made on this journey?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Removing a toxic relationship from my life," he said. "There was someone close to me, family, who provided some financial support early on, and I was grateful for that. But the support came with strings, emotional strings, the constant reminders, the sense that I owed this person not just money but gratitude on demand. It became a form of control. It was suffocating my growth. And the hardest thing I did, the thing that unlocked everything for me, was recognizing that dynamic for what it was and walking away from it. The moment I did that, I felt free." The host made an understanding sound. "So important," the host said. "You can't pour from a controlled cup." Ryan agreed. He sounded reflective and healed. I paused the audio. I thought about every transfer I had made. Every month for 36 months. The transmission repair, Eli's braces, Piper's specialist visits, the vacation I didn't take, the condo I didn't buy, the woman I loved who left because I was spread too thin. Constant reminders. Strings. Controlling. Suffocating. Toxic. I had called Ryan on his birthday every year. I had called to check in on the kids. I had asked for updates on the product because I was genuinely interested. Because I was rooting for him. Not because I was demanding recognition. Not because I was tracking the debt publicly. Not because I was threatening consequences. I tried to remember a single instance where I had held the money over his head. A single instance where I had used it as leverage. A single instance where I had even brought up repayment in a way that felt like pressure rather than normal conversation between people who care about each other. I couldn't find one. I had been, by every measure I could examine honestly, a supportive older brother who gave what he had and asked for very little in return. And in a podcast studio, with a microphone in front of him and a newly minted investor behind him, my brother had rewritten that into something ugly. I didn't call him. There was nothing to call. His number went to a message saying the voicemail was full. I suspected he had blocked me, but I wasn't certain. I messaged him one time through an email address I knew he still used for business correspondence. It was short. I told him I'd heard the podcast. I told him I wasn't angry, which was a slight exaggeration, but I meant the spirit of it. I told him that if he had felt controlled or suffocated at any point, I was genuinely sorry. That hadn't been my intention. And I said that whatever he felt about me personally, I hoped we could at least have an honest conversation before he walked away permanently. I never received a reply. What happened next is the part one didn't anticipate. The podcast episode circulated. It had enough emotional resonance that people shared it. Several people in our extended circle of family and mutual friends listened to it. Some of them connected the dots. They knew Ryan and I were close. They knew I'd been supporting him financially. They knew we'd gone quiet. The family responses were mixed, and none of them were comfortable. My uncle called me, calmly, but pointedly. "You need to be careful about how you handle this, Daniel. Ryan's doing well now. Don't make trouble." An aunt messaged me on Facebook to say she hoped I would find peace and let it go. A college friend of Ryan's, someone I'd known for 15 years, sent me a message saying he had no idea I'd been pressuring Ryan and that he hoped I'd reflect on my behavior. What struck me about these responses was not their hostility. Most of them weren't even hostile, just misaligned, but the degree to which Ryan's version had traveled so quickly and rooted so deeply. He had told a story once, on a podcast, without using my name, and within 2 weeks of that episode circulating, people who knew us both had absorbed that story as fact. They weren't checking. They weren't asking me. They were extending the same good faith to Ryan's account that I had extended to him for 3 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother was the only one who knew the full picture. She had been the one who'd watched me sacrifice for 3 years. She had been there for the early conversations. She didn't question my version of events. But she also urged me to be careful, to be gracious. to consider that Ryan might be going through something she didn't understand. "I love both of you," she said. "I don't want to lose either of you. And you are the older one, Daniel. You're the steadier one." I was so tired of being the steadier one. There is a specific exhaustion that comes from being the person in a family who is always expected to absorb things, to be the one who keeps their composure, to be the one who takes the longer view, to be the one who, when hurt, is expected to prioritize the relationship over the injury. I had been doing that my entire adult life. I had done it when Ryan dropped out of college. I had done it through every job change, every financial squeeze, every request for the Christmas gift card that was large enough to actually help. I had done it for 3 years of monthly transfers without complaint. And now I was being asked to do it again, to be the steadier one, to absorb being called toxic on a public platform and respond with grace. I was genuinely trying. But grace has limits when the wound is fresh and the person who inflicted it is giving podcast interviews about his emotional growth. In the months that followed, I did something I'd been going back and forth on for a long time. I talked about it, publicly, not to attack Ryan, not to demand the money back through social pressure, but because the silence felt like complicity, like agreeing with the version of events he had put into the world. I reached out to a content creator I trusted, someone who covers family and personal finance stories. I told the whole story, factually, with documentation, bank records, transfer confirmations, a text exchange where Ryan said explicitly, "I'll pay you back every cent," another where he said, "When this works, we're going to take care of you." The response was significant. People who had heard Ryan's podcast episode and assumed the worst about me now had another side. Many of them were angry on my behalf. Some of them were devastated. They'd admired Ryan's story, and the new context changed it. Ryan's team reached out to the content creator, disputing my version. They provided no documentation. The content creator stood by the story. Ryan never contacted me directly. Our mutual friends fragmented. Some stayed with Ryan. Some came to me. Some stepped back from both of us entirely, exhausted by the whole thing. It has been 8 months now. My mother cries sometimes when she talks to me. She has not stopped trying to mediate, though she has largely given up expecting a result. She had Ryan and his family over for Christmas. She had me over separately the following weekend. 2 holiday celebrations, 2 conversations carefully kept from overlapping. I sat at her kitchen table on the Sunday after Christmas, eating reheated food and watching her try to be cheerful, and I thought about how a single decision, saying yes to my brother 3 years ago, had divided my family's holiday calendar in half. Eli and Piper, my nephew and niece, I haven't seen them. That's the part that catches me off guard sometimes, in quiet moments. I was close with those kids. I helped pay for Eli's braces. I sent Piper books for her birthday every year because she loved to read. I don't know what they've been told about me. I don't know if they've been told anything. I don't know if they ask about their Uncle Daniel. I don't know if they remember me at all. I've been asked, consistently, by people who hear this story, "Do you regret it?" My answer is complicated. I don't regret believing in Ryan's ability. The platform is real. The idea was solid. My early confidence in him was not misplaced, at least not in his professional capabilities. I don't regret helping. In the abstract, helping someone you love is not a thing to regret. What I regret is the absence of documentation, not because I wanted to hold the debt over him, but because a written agreement would have changed the nature of the transaction from a gift that could be reframed to a loan that had objective terms. It would have been harder to erase, harder to reframe as control. A signed document doesn't change what happened, but it does anchor the record. It makes denial structurally harder. If Ryan had signed a loan agreement, he could still have chosen to walk away and say he felt controlled. But he would have had to do it while a piece of paper sat in a drawer stating plainly and without emotion what had actually taken place between us. I think about that piece of paper sometimes. How much it would have meant to me in the months after the podcast episode. Not for legal action, I never considered that, but just for the grounding of it. The confirmation that I was not inventing something, that it had been real and acknowledged and documented by both of us. I regret the way I structured my sacrifice, silently, without articulation. I thought not complaining was a virtue. I thought bearing the cost without protest was what a good brother did. What it actually did was make my sacrifice invisible. And invisible sacrifices are the easiest to deny. There is something worth saying about silence as a strategy for preserving relationships. I believed, for 3 years, that not speaking about what I was giving would protect Ryan's dignity. That naming it too directly would make it transactional in a way that would damage the thing between us. So I kept most of it to myself. I processed the relationship costs quietly. I handled the financial stress quietly. I was, above all else, quiet. And what I learned, what I am still processing, is that quiet sacrifice is not the same as invisible sacrifice. It just means you have no witnesses. It means that when the story gets rewritten, there is no one in the room to correct the record. My silence was an act of love. It was also, inadvertently, an act of self-erasure. I had written myself out of my own story before Ryan got the chance. I regret not asking harder questions when his communication started to thin out. The signs were there. A little early. A shift in tone, a decrease in frequency. I wanted to believe it was just the stress of the deal closing. I gave benefit of the doubt I should have held back. But the deepest regret, the one that takes up the most space when I sit with it honestly, is not about money or documentation or communication patterns. It's about what it means to watch someone you raised your estimation of, someone you carried on your back through the hardest years of their life, look directly at that history and decide that it didn't happen the way it happened. Not misremember, not reframe through the lens of their own pain. Decide. Ryan is not a confused man. He is sharp and strategic and precise. He knew what he was doing in that podcast studio. He was constructing a narrative in which his success was fully his own. His freedom was something he had to claim from a toxic force, and the person who helped him most was the obstacle he had to clear. It was a clean story, a good story, even in the way good stories are economical and emotionally legible. Hero overcomes obstacle. Hero grows. Hero wins. I was the obstacle. That's the part one am still learning to hold. I am rebuilding. That is the truest sentence I can write. My savings account is recovering, slower than I would like, but recovering. I drive a car I finally replaced last spring. I am looking, again, at the housing market. Dating someone new, carefully, with a little more self-disclosure than I was capable of before all of this. I tell her more than I told the woman before her. I've learned that keeping your costs internal doesn't protect the people who care about you. It just keeps them in the dark about what you're carrying. She knows about Ryan. She knows the full shape of it. She doesn't tell me I should forgive him. She tells me that whatever I decide, she hopes it comes from what I actually want, not from what I think I'm supposed to want. That distinction matters more than I expected. I talk to my mother every Sunday. She is doing her best with an impossible situation. I've thought about whether I will ever reach out to Ryan again, whether I want to, whether I would accept a reconciliation if one were offered. I've sat with that question in the early mornings, in the quiet before the day starts, when honesty is harder to avoid. Here's the honest answer. I don't know. Reconciliation requires an honest accounting, an acknowledgement, at minimum, of what actually happened. Without that, whatever we rebuilt would be constructed on the same unsteady foundation as the story he told the podcast audience. And I'm too old and too tired and have given too much to accept a relationship built on a lie about who I am. If Ryan came to me with honesty, real honesty, not a managed public statement designed to rehabilitate his image, I think I would be willing to try. Not because I've forgotten, but because he is my brother. Because Eli and Piper are my nephew and niece. Because my mother deserves to have her family in the same room at Christmas. But he would have to come to me honestly. And I don't know if that is something he knows how to do anymore. The title of that podcast episode, I looked it up again recently, just to confirm I was remembering it correctly, was called Building on Your Own Terms. I kept thinking about that phrase. Building on your own terms. What does it mean to build on your own terms when the foundation was poured by someone else? When the runway was funded by someone else's sacrifice? When the time you needed to think and create and develop was purchased with someone else's money and someone else's delayed life? You can still take credit for the building. You did the work. The vision was yours. The execution was yours. The skill was yours. But building on your own terms implies you started from the ground, that no one else's hands were in the concrete. Ryan didn't build on his own terms. He built on mine. And when the building was finished and the cameras arrived, he airbrushed me out of the construction crew. I've seen this pattern named in the years since this happened. I've read about it, talked about it in therapy, heard it described by other people in different contexts. There is something that happens to certain people when they receive significant help from someone close to them. The help, over time, becomes uncomfortable, not because the help was given badly, but because accepting help requires admitting need. And admitting need requires a degree of vulnerability and humility that conflicts with the identity of a self-made, independent person. So the help gets reclassified. If the help was actually a form of control, then the helper is not a benefactor, but a villain. And rejecting the villain is not ingratitude, it's strength. It's self-actualization. It makes a better story. I think that's what happened with Ryan. I think he needed to become someone who made it on his own. And making it on his own required retroactively removing me from the story. And removing me from the story required making me the reason he needed to be removed. I don't say this to excuse him. I say it because understanding the mechanism doesn't make it less destructive. It just makes it comprehensible. $90,000 is a number. It is money I worked for, over years, with discipline and sacrifice. It represents a condo I didn't buy, a vacation I didn't take, a relationship that frayed under the weight of my stretched attention. Years of my life, expressed in arithmetic. But what the $90,000 purchased, what I actually gave Ryan, was time. Time he needed. Time he couldn't have bought for himself. Time in which his children grew up in their home instead of scrambling through financial uncertainty. Time in which his marriage remained stable. Time in which his mind was free to build something real. You cannot put a dollar figure on time. You cannot put a dollar figure on stability or on the freedom to pursue a dream without the crushing weight of survival anxiety. I gave my brother all of that, and he called it a leash. I tell this story now for one reason that matters, because I think there are a lot of people who have been where I have been, who have given without demanding formal arrangements, who have trusted on the basis of love instead of contracts, who have watched someone they sacrificed for construct a version of events that erases them. And I want those people to know that they are not crazy, that their sacrifice was real. That being erased does not mean you did not exist. I existed. I was there. I have the bank statements and the text messages and the memory of every phone call and every milestone update and every, I won't forget what you did for me. Ryan built something real. I hope his company succeeds. I hope Cassie is happy. I hope Eli's braces did their job and Piper is still reading. But I also hope, somewhere, in a quiet moment, in whatever space Ryan reserves for the truth, that he knows. He knows who was there. He knows what it cost me. He knows that what he called a leash was actually a lifeline. And that the person he called toxic on a podcast with 200,000 listeners was the reason he had the time and safety and stability to build the thing that changed his life. I am not a villain. I am an older brother who believed in someone who ultimately didn't deserve the depth of that belief. And I am slowly, carefully, intentionally building on my own terms now. Without a safety net. Without anyone's financial backing. Without anyone's help. Exactly the way Ryan claims he always did. It turns out it takes considerably longer this way. But at least when it's finished and done, I'll know whose hands poured the concrete. Have you ever supported a family member financially only to have them turn on you the moment they didn't need you anymore? Have you ever been erased from someone's success story after funding it with your own sacrifice? Have you ever been called controlling for asking for basic gratitude? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes the most important thing is simply being told, your sacrifice was real, and you are not the villain they needed you to be. If you believe that you cannot take $90,000 from your brother, call him toxic on a podcast, and still call yourself self-made, hit that like button and subscribe. Because building something real is worth celebrating. But not if the foundation was someone else's sacrifice and the first brick you laid was a lie. #I paid for his dream.